The Maple Leafs avoid arbitration with Connor Dewar, leaving Nick Robertson the lone unsigned RFA. Can they mend that relationship too? You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Actually got to use the Game Time app the other day. Got me some tickets to the 30 minutes before first pitch. I was able to scoop up some pretty cheap tickets, and I was very happy about it. They lost, but I did get to see a decent ball game at least out of the Jays. So thanks to Game Time for those tickets. We got some news, Dave. Just as we were about to sit down and record, the Leafs have blessed us with breaking news to talk about. Connor Dewar inking a 1-year, $1.18 million contract. He avoids arbitration, and he'll be back with the Maple Leafs. Your thoughts?
Obviously, just news we were kind of waiting for. I think arbitration hearings are coming in a few days, so it's kind of good the Leafs avoid one this time around after last year with with Ilya Samsonov having to deal with that whole ordeal. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting, a huge deal for him. Like I thought in that million and a bit range for him after, considering his role and things. So just good to get that deal done. So now just check off another contract off the books they have to worry about.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm just seeing what some people online are saying in terms of what the contract valued at based on production. And Evolving Hockey projected it at a $1.4 million contract. Dom Lucian apparently had him valued at about $2 million, which is interesting. But it comes in at 1.18, so I think a very good deal for Dewar, very good deal for the Maple Leafs. This is someone who they traded for last year at the deadline. He gave a fourth-round pick, and he came in and pretty much became a staple on the fourth line. He was a high-energy guy, good skater. He could give you versatility. But he had 11 goals last year, 19 points in total, split between Toronto and Minnesota, to go along with 123 hits. I think there's a lot going on here with the Maple Leafs, and they like him a lot. I think Dave might just dropped out. We might try and get Dave back here so he can continue on with the conversation. Looks like he's frozen. He'll be back in a sec. But yeah, Connor Dewar, 1 year, $1.18 million. They've got great underlying numbers too from him from an analytical standpoint. I was taking a look at Natural Stat Trick and just seeing, okay, what did Connor Dewar do last year to make the Maple Leafs believe that, he could be part of this team moving forward. And he's got really good numbers. You look at the amount of shots that he allows, like his shot for and shots against differential, and he's, 52.5% shot for percentage. So the Maple Leafs are getting credited for more shots on goal when he's on the ice than when he's not. It's the exact same thing when you take a look at the expected goals. He's actually has higher expected goals for percentage than expected goals against, which is, pretty good considering that Connor Dewar was deployed as a fourth liner and mainly as a shutdown player. And the fact that he's got a higher goals for per 60 than goals against per 60, according to expectation, that is. I mean, that's pretty good, pretty solid. I think we had Dave back. You back, buddy?
Yeah, I'm back. Just more lovely technology problems in the summer. I think, and I know you're talking. I know it's summertime. Just the computer's like, why are we working right now? I think the big one with Connor Dewar too. I mean, you explained the stats there, but even just watch him, that this is a player that's capable, I think, of doing more offensively, right? If given the opportunity. I mean, how many shorthanded, even shorthanded, how many times do you find a way to generate some offense, right? Generate scoring chances. I mean, that's something that goes kind of unnoticed with his game, is his ability to kind of make something out of nothing at times.
Yeah, and he's someone who is going to come in and really helped. Like when Maple Leafs went on a stretch where they had definitely improved themselves. I mean, he was a guy who was an anchor on that penalty kill, along with Marner, along with David Camp. So Connor Dewar doing some good things, and the Maple Leafs happy to get him locked up 1 year, $1.8 million. Right, you guys got great speed, good versatility. He's relentless on the forecheck. This is a perfect everyday fourth liner for the Maple Leafs. He can help out on special teams, obviously, as we just alluded to, and to your point, there may be a little bit of untapped potential there when it comes to the offense. He had 11 goals last year. I mean, and from a fourth liner, if you can get double-digit goals, you can get 11, 12, get that up to maybe 13, 14. You're laughing to get that out of a guy who's more of a defensively sound forward at $1.18 million. If you can get the goals, they're a bit of a bonus at this point. But I think the Leafs did well getting Connor Dewar locked up and avoiding having to slam him pretty harshly and heavily, like we always see happen in arbitration. So kudos to the Maple Leafs for making it happen. So he will be part of the group moving forward. Will Nick Robertson be part of the group moving forward? He remains the lone restricted free agent without a contract this year. We know there's a bit of a stalemate. Let's go over it and see if maybe they can mend the relationship at this point in the summer. We'll talk about that on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Price on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, viewed from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game work out of buying MLB tickets. They've got last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater events. They've got flash deals. They've got zone deals. They've got the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Save the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we are each and every weekday here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. You can find it wherever you get podcasts from, Spotify, iTunes, wherever, and also up on YouTube. If you enjoy the conversation and you enjoy the podcast that we have each and every day, we ask you would subscribe. Still got a lot of unsubscribed to the show. So let's pump those numbers up. We're still on a road to 10K. Get to 10K subscribers, and we're giving away another jersey. So the quicker we get there, the quicker one of you lucky listeners can get yourselves a brand new Maple Leafs jersey. Speaking of, actually, I don't think we really brought it up on the podcast, but the last jersey winner sent us a very nice message and some photos of him in the jersey. And man, I'm so pumped and happy that he ended up becoming the winner, because he was certainly grateful for the jersey that he had won. He's a daily listener, listens all the time. So shout out, you know who you are. And I was really happy to see him get it. So hopefully the next go around, once we hit 10K, another very lucky and happy subscriber can end up with another jersey. That being said, maybe it'll be a Nick Robertson jersey. Dave, is he still going to be with the team by then is the question. He remains as the lone kind of piece of business, I guess, that the Maple Leafs have to do coming off of this summer. He's the only one without a contract that they still have the rights to as a restricted free agent. But there's no arbitration, so they've got more control with this one, and they hold all the leverage. That said, if we recall earlier in the summer, reports came out, not from the horse's mouth, but reports came out, I believe it was Chris Johnston who made these reports, that he had been told by a source that Nick Robertson wanted to change his scenery. He wanted out of Toronto and did not intend on signing an RFA deal to remain with the club. Here we are today on Tuesday, July 23rd. He still remains unsigned. How do you think this ends up playing out?
I think they're going to probably try to tell him, like, look, right now, your value is not probably what he thinks it is, right? I know he probably wants to change the scenery and think that's what's going to get him to be an everyday NHLer, but the body work hasn't been there enough to suggest that he's in that position, right? So I think for the Leafs' sake, the best thing to do is try to reestablish that value. Obviously, for Robertson, he just feels like getting that everyday opportunity will be the best thing for him. I just personally don't see it unless a team comes out and makes a deal that, for the Leafs' sake, gives them something that maybe they don't have. I don't know a team that's going to do that. I don't know what team out there has the need for Nick Robertson right now that I would say, like, go and get this player from this team for Nick Robertson. I just don't see it right now.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a change of scenery for a change of scenery type of player. I know I've seen like Arthur Kaliev get thrown around there from the LA Kings. Maybe Arthur Kaliev's a player who has spent some time up in the press box and hasn't really flourished the way that Nick Robertson has here in Toronto. They're both kind of in the same boat. I think they're both similar, if I'm not mistaken, pretty close to one another too, both in the second round. But high goal scorers in the Ontario League, but haven't been able to translate it into the NHL. Haven't really been given the opportunity to translate it into the NHL. So that's one name that's been thrown out there. Maybe potentially there's a defenseman that they can maybe try and get a swap for. But yeah, I still think the Maple Leafs actually would prefer to hold him and keep him at this point and try and smooth things over. Just because I look at how the offseason has gone, and I'm taking a look at how the roster kind of, is built out right now. You look at the depth chart, there's still a hole in the middle six. There is a hole in the middle six, potentially. And Nick Robertson could fill that hole still to this day. Like last year, if he were to play the entire season, this guy was on pace to score more than 20 goals. Like, it's not like he's not a useful player. He could be a 20-goal scorer as an everyday player in the lineup, right? And came back, he scored a goal. I am curious to see how, things maybe would be under Berube as opposed to Sheldon Keefe. I guess that would remain to be seen, but I still think the Maple Leafs look at him as an asset. So they're not looking to dump him for nothing. So they would prefer to keep him and maybe sign him and give him an opportunity to flourish and try and mend that relationship. But if he truly does dig his heels into the sand and says, no, I want out. I don't want to be in Toronto anymore. I'm an American. I'd rather go play somewhere in the States. I don't want to be here. I'm sour about how things have happened. I'm sour about how I was treated, where I became a cap casualty last year and had to go down to the American League when I was better than some of the guys who were playing in the show. I'm sure all of that kind of combines into him not being too pleased about the situation that's kind of unfolded for him in Toronto the last couple of seasons. So we'll see if he can, overcome all of those, that anger that might be burning inside of him because of that. And maybe they come up with a deal. We'll see. But that is the one little bit of, I guess, work that Brad Treliving Company still has to get done between now and the summer. They figure that out, or, move on amicably and find a trade that works for both parties.
Yeah, I think that's the big one for me is, what does Craig Berube potentially see in Nick Robertson? Also, can Nick Robertson kind of play to how I think Craig Berube will want him to play, right? Like, yes, he is an offensively driven player, but we also know that part of the reason why he hasn't been able to stick it as an everyday NHL is that when he's not producing offense, there really wasn't something else that was giving him a chance to really stay in the lineup, every day. So I that's my only concern with him under Craig Berube is, like, will Craig Berube be able to get him to play in the way that I think he needs to play to be an everyday NHLer? He probably could. I think if that if those standards are outlined right from the start of camp. And I think also like Nick Robertson being healthy over the offseason, right? Like that's also been an issue for him. He hasn't really been able to stay healthy enough, especially going into training camp. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't even think he was around for training camp last year. I think he was still recovering from his surgery that he had at the end of last year.
I can't recall if he was or not, but he did remain healthy all season for the first time.
Yeah.
Like he was healthy. I can't remember. There may have been something in training camp. I can't recall, but he did stay healthy, which is good because that has not been the case throughout his entire pro career. And this was kind of the first season he was able to get a full, like 6 to 8 months of hockey in. And it was up and down, and it wasn't based on his play. I guess it was kind of just a numbers game for some of it, which he deemed to be unfair, I would imagine, which is why there's a little bit of bad blood right now between the two parties.
He was at
taking a
training
look
camp
at
last year.
Okay,
yeah, he was at training camp last
so
year.
it was the year before. Yeah, I think it was the year before, maybe, or someone else that we were thinking of. Bobby McMahon. Bobby McMahon was hurt, I think, at training camp last year. That might have been it. Yeah. I was taking a look at some free agents and thinking possibly, okay, if they do move on from Nick Robertson, they kind of do have to fill a middle six role. Are there players still out there to fill those roles that might factor into whether or not they move on from Nick Robertson? So why don't we come back and I'll give you kind of a list of guys and you tell me if you'd be interested in bringing these guys in on I don't know, whether it's a PTO or a cheap 1-year deal, whatever it may be. But I found 3 players that I think could fit as a middle six replacement, sort of, to Nick Robertson. So we'll come back. We'll talk about that. And the Smile Zone Foundation Golf event went on over the weekend. Tons of NHLers were there. Ryan O'Reilly opened up about what he liked about playing with Mitch Marner. We'll tell you about that also on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Pass and drive and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to make your car the keep running out at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you here. Connor Dewar inks a 1-year, $1.18 million contract. He avoids arbitration. He'll be part of your Maple Leafs 24-25 team. But will Nick Robertson remain a Maple Leaf? He is an unsigned RFA at the moment. There is a report that there is an outstanding trade request from Nick Robertson. We're not 100% sure. Tree Living came out and basically, said we'd prefer to have him, but we'll see where that ends up going. But in order to move on from Nick Robertson, you would think that there would have to be someone, that they could replace him with in the lineup, somewhere in the top 6, top 9, I guess, where there is a spot available for not Nick Robertson. And who is there? Someone out in free agency that you can bring in, whether it's on a PTO or a free agent signing, kind of a cheap deal. Is there someone out there? And I found 3 names that are possibilities who can maybe replace a Nick Robertson in the lineup. I'm going to give you 3 names. You let me know if you're willing to swipe left or swipe right on these players. Okay.
Okay.
I will give you the first name. He is a former Maple Leaf, JVR, still sitting out there in free agency at the ripe age of 35 years old.
You know what? I would say swipe left. I know he's I remember watching him during the playoffs. Like there was that one game where he scored, but like he doesn't really provide much else because like he'd have to be a guy you have on your power play kind of net front. Yeah, I know he'd be probably a middle, like third line winger to provide offense. I just don't know if really there's much else he provides. I'd rather just have Nick Robertson at that point.
Yeah. He had 38 points last year, which isn't terrible. It's pretty on par with what he had the last 3 years. He's been hovering in and around 40. Yeah, 40 in since the pandemic, I guess. He had 43, 38. He had 29 in 61 games. So a little bit of an injury-riddled season in his final year with Philadelphia. And then this past season, signing with the Bruins, he had 11 goals, 38 points in 71 games, and then added 5 points in 11 games in the playoffs. So he's not what he used to be with the Maple Leafs, right? Back to Toronto, his final year in Toronto, 36 goals he had with the Maple Leafs. That was a career high, 2-time 30-goal scorer with the Maple Leafs. Way back when he was a core piece of this team. He's not going to come back and be that. He's been there. He's played lots of hockey over his career, and with the Boston Bruins this past season, went into the second round. So I don't know. It's just a name that's out there and potentially could circle back on a JVR reunion, but maybe not the best option. What about a Max Pacioretty? It's kind of a similar situation, right? That well past his prime, but could still be a power forward, heavy veteran presence in this lineup.
My issue with him is the injury history. Like, he's dealt with 2 Achilles injuries. I'm pretty sure of. Like that to me, especially someone who, yeah, I know he's a very capable scoring winger, but I just think the injuries have really taken a toll on him. Because, yeah, a couple years ago he had a really good season with Vegas, but then I think he's played just above 50 games the last couple of years. So I'm personally in the maybe you give him a PTO. He's like a guy you give a PTO if he can stay healthy and you feel like that's someone you want that he can provide some depth scoring. I'd consider it, but I wouldn't go out of my way to bring in and give a guaranteed contract to Max Pacioretty.
Okay. And the last name that I'll bring in, a little bit of a dark horse, Alex Nylander, brother of William Nylander, had a terrific final couple of months of the season once he got traded to Columbus. I was quite surprised that they did not elect to give him a contract tendering as an RFA for whatever reason. I don't think it was a lot. It was like a league minimum RFA deal, I'm pretty sure. But in 23 games, he had 11 goals for the Columbus Blue Jackets and looked to seemingly find some offense that has been in the NHL throughout his career. He had a career high 10 back in 2019-20 with the Chicago Blackhawks, but has not really found a home in the NHL ever since. He's been mainly an AHL player, but played pretty well for Columbus last season. Could that have been the start of something for Alex Nylander? And could the Maple Leafs maybe look at bringing him in to reunite him with brother Willie?
Well, him and brother Willie have been really working hard this summer together. I don't know if you've watched any of the. I've watched a few of the videos that have come in. Like he's a player I'm intrigued with because he's on the younger side too, and when he was
only like 24, 25 in that range.
I think he's in like 25, 26, right? Like he's a player that I think a lot of teams are just like, if we can just get him in the right situation, he can maybe be something. Like I think if I remember correctly, like when he was with Pittsburgh a few years ago in the AHL, he was almost a point per game player. And then you also bring up what he did with Columbus. I don't see why not. Like I think he'd be worthwhile even just to give a look. And I don't know if he plays center. I think he just plays the wing. But maybe he is a player that could potentially play down the middle. I wouldn't say no. I was surprised he didn't get the deal, didn't get tendered an offer, as you said. But you're looking at a guy who can provide depth scoring. He showed it with Columbus. He's capable of doing that. I think he had a hat trick one of his first days with Columbus, right? So I know he's a right shot, but he plays on the left side, so I don't think that'd be too much of an issue there. So, and look, it'd be nice to kind of see the Nylander connection too.
Yeah, I think so. So I of the three, I think Alex Nylander, A, probably would be the cheapest, and B, probably would be the most option, just because I think there's more upside there. Like JVR and Pacioretty, well past their prime, right? Like they've had their time in a league. Nylander's like just approaching his prime, right? So you might be getting the best couple of years out of William Nylander, if out of Alex Nylander, sorry, if you bring him in now, and then being, with his brother, I'm sure that would be a nice little storyline to follow as well. So I'd totally be for the Maple Leafs looking into Alex Nylander as a depth option and try and bring him in. I mean, even if it's to bring him in on a cheap deal, like he's someone who you probably could play down in the Marlies and be a call up. He's played the last 4 seasons pretty well, primarily in the American League. So it's not like he'd be completely opposed to that if he doesn't make the team out of camp. So I'd be fully on board with the Maple Leafs signing Alex Nylander at some point. All right. So the other thing that went on this weekend, the Smile Zone Foundation golf event, bunch of NHLers out speaking. I've seen a lot of clips of many people talking, including Ryan O'Reilly. And if you recall, there was a report, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago or so. O'Reilly came out and there was, just a report about how he had said that he tried to pitch to Barry Trotz to trade for Mitch Marner. Supposedly he wanted to play with Marner again. So he was asked about that, and not necessarily to divulge if he actually made the trade request, but divulge what he enjoyed playing about Mitch Marner. And he had some pretty good things to say. Loved his compete level. He said when he's out there on the ice, there's very little people on this planet that can do some of the things that he does. And I don't know, does it make you think any differently about Mitch Marner when you hear a guy like Ryan O'Reilly open up and speak so glowingly about him?
Well, the thing is, like, we've seen it during the regular season. Like, it's not like we hadn't seen it from Marner and that we're not seeing it. It's just when the playoff comes around, we're wondering where that Marner is, right? When the Leafs really need Mitch Marner to provide that, that skill, those things that no other players really can do. We haven't seen it, and not just from him. I know that sometimes we get too caught up on just putting it on Marner, but we just haven't really seen it when it really counts. And unfortunately, that's what makes good players great players, is their ability to do it when it really matters, right? So yeah, I'm sure O'Reilly liked playing with Marner. Maybe he feels that in the right situation, he could potentially bring that. But the problem is in Toronto, it just hasn't happened yet. And the expectation versus the reality, especially when it comes to his contract, that's going to be talked about all year long. Can he handle, the expectation that's going to come with him wanting to be paid more than what he's getting now? And we've talked about where he kind of stands in versus the other players like Matthews and Nylander. Look, I think O'Reilly is always liked. I remember one of the first games he played with Marner, got a hat trick. You're going to love playing with a player that's going to get you the puck in the right situations. It's just in the playoffs, we didn't see that. Where Ryan O'Reilly even admitted he had a really terrible playoffs, right? Like it wasn't.
He was hurt, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. It wasn't, the expectations that we had, even on O'Reilly, didn't meet it. And yes, part of that was also because of health. So, yeah, it's nice that he has those glowing recommendations, but at the same time, I think it's tough for Leaf fans to really say, "Oh, let's be excited about it," when we haven't seen it when the chips come down.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. But good chance we get to see it again next year, though, pal. I would imagine we will be seeing Mitch Marner in a Maple Leaf uniform. It's crazy how often I still get asked by people, my thoughts and if Marner's going to get traded. I'm like, we're almost in August. Like, this trade would have happened by now. Like, I think if this trade was going to happen, it would have been done on or by July 1st. The fact that we're this far into the season, I think, into the offseason, I think we're safe to assume that Mitchie Marnes will be back in the blue next year, and he'll have one more opportunity to show Leaf fans, and more importantly, show management that that he can get it done in the playoffs. So we'll see what that looks like in, what do we got now? I don't know, 10 months, I guess. 9-10 months until he gets to show it off again. What a great few months it's going to be watching Mitch Marner play with the contract looming over him. I am curious to see what it looks like. All right, buddy, let's wrap things up here today. Fun stuff. Very thankful to the Maple Leafs and Connor Dewar for giving us some last-minute content to chat about some breaking news. I think it's a great deal for the Maple Leafs. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. And follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back on another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.